Welcome to this brief introduction to a set of projects we're going to do this semester called the Expanding Perspective. We're going to start off with a short video on your place in a long academic or intellectual phylogeny of ideas that led up to where we understand things today. Now, I've kind of drawn this sort of snail-shaped object here, and this is my favorite way to draw a phylogeny. And a phylogeny is a history. I mean, technically speaking, a phylogeny is the evolutionary history of a set of organisms. And the line connecting them is sort of a genetic line, in that we're passing down hereditary information, and as things branch off, they diversify and become different. This obviously is not going to be exactly that. This is more about the history of thinking and thought. And you are part of a lineage, if you will. Notice over here, that's me. And we can put you in the tree as well. So you belong right here. Right? You. Which is the important part of this. And you're learning from me right now, and there's been a long chain of learning that goes quite a ways back, and obviously we could go further back than this, but I thought I would just put into context a set of these that starts, maybe with Immanuel Kant in the 1750s. The sort of bigger beginning to this would be this group of guys right here. Goethe and Humboldt were part of an intellectual group in the late 1700s that developed a lot of scientific thinking. Alex Humboldt developed a lot of theories that we still use today. For example, he described the pattern of elevation change in different biomes. So as you go up in elevation, you go through different biomes leading to tundra at the top. And he also noted that that same pattern occurs when you go up in latitude, starting at the equator, ending at tundra up in the Arctic. Goethe wrote many treatises on light, on the morphology and evolution of plants, and they were very influential thinkers that launched modern scientific thought in a way. Strong influence, Alex Humboldt knew Charles Darwin, and Charles Darwin was younger than Alex, and Alex Humboldt served as a major inspiration for Charles Darwin, his thinking about evolution and the change of things, and also about exploration and going out and finding empirical evidence to support your ideas. Charles Darwin, as you know, came up with the theory of evolution. One of Alex Humboldt's direct students, Louis Agassiz, over here, actually was a very good scientist. He studied a lot that had to do with diversity. He was sort of a founding person when it comes to studying the idea of biodiversity and taxonomy and how things are related and all that stuff. But it turns out he hated the idea of evolution. So he was himself a creationist. And we'll get back to why that's important in a moment. Agassiz had a student, Edward Burge, who was the beginning of the sort of study of aquatic biology, specifically something called limnology. And they were studying about how ecosystems worked, how they began to function. Edward Burge, interestingly enough, took upon himself to debate William Jennings Bryan in a very famous debate in the 1920s. William Jennings Bryan was running for president at the time. He was a young earth creationist. That was one of his founding principles. He also was the lawyer that tried to prosecute the teacher that was documented in the movie and book The Scopes Trial. Anyways, so you might have heard of that before. So Edward Burge was a sort of a proponent for Charles Darwin's theory of evolution. And we'll get back to why that also is interesting. Anyways, Edward Burge had a student, Chancey Juday, and he worked with G. Evelyn Hutchinson to develop what became the beginning of sort of ecology. So if we wanted to say the birth of the study of ecology happens right in here, um, mainly through theories and ideas and writings of G. Evelyn Hutchinson, but Chancey Today worked with him to develop that stuff. And it turns out Chancey's student Arthur Hassler became the first president of the Ecological Society of America in 1961. By the way, that was the year I was born. I know, can you imagine? That long ago. So this is sort of where I enter the picture in a very rudimentary way. Arthur Hassler's student John Neese was a very influential person. He worked with Aldo Leopold. He actually helped him edit the Sand County Almanac, which began yet another interesting movement that would be called now environmentalism or conservation. So the beginning of the environmental movement happens right here. And so there's these sort of major intellectual boundaries we pass through as we look through this sort of history of thinking. So we have the beginning of environmentalism. After that, during this whole period, starting back here with Edward Burge, ending with John Neese, these guys were all at the University of Wisconsin studying aquatic biology. And then one of John's students goes on, John Gehring, and his student C. Peter McRoy, they're at the University of Alaska, and they transition to a different type of study, to the marine environment, studying things like salmon and how they move around and how they accumulate toxins and the effects that poisons have on them. C. Peter McRoy was interested and developed a huge research base for eelgrass and how eelgrass supports an entire fisheries community and how we need to preserve the eelgrass beds to maintain fisheries and things. And Susan Williams, who was my advisor, she went on to study both the eelgrass and later in her career she did a lot of work with coral reefs and conservationism and stuff like that. I studied with her actually at San Diego State. She was there for a while. We were part of a larger Pacific Estuarine Research Lab that was run there. So we were focused out of San Diego because of this particular research focus. And I did my work on intertidal algae and the evolution and population biology of that. Anyways, I did my undergraduate at UC Davis, where Susan Williams ended up. And I had a number of professors there that I did work with. Either independent studies. I did an independent study for Girat Vermeer, Peter Marler. I curated the Zoology Museum for H.B. Schaefer. I did a large intertidal ecology project for Rick Grossberg, and my undergraduate advisor was Art Shapiro. These guys all influenced me as well. So there you go. And you're studying for me, so that's how you fit into this. But here's something I wanted to point out. This was actually the whole purpose. Wasn't really to give you all these little details about the history here, but more to point out that if you look at this overall pattern of how thought was developed, what you'll find is that there's only one woman in this entire thing. All of the men from here back are all white. It starts with Goethe and Humboldt and Kant and these cats and Charles Darwin in Europe with a very aristocratic bunch of white guys. Super privileged people that were, they were sort of gentlemen scholars. They had to fund themselves. They had their own labs. They even funded many of their own expeditions and things. These were very rich white guys. And then as you move along, they sort of decrease. Obviously, when you come from Europe to America, we don't have the sort of aristocracy that you have in Europe, but these are still all white upper middle class researchers all the way through, and they have a particular perspective. When you make the transition over here to environmentalism, there begins to see a contribution of other thinking, of other types of people that are outside the sort of white privileged class. John Neese, although he was a white man, he was an out gay man, which was extremely unusual in the 60s and 70s. and he became an LGBTQ activist in the 1980s. And then, of course, Susan Williams is a woman, so there's another perspective change. Obviously, I'm just a white guy, so I fit into the general pattern. Most of my advisors here were also white men from upper middle class, although Girat Vermeer was a blind man. And we'll talk more about him later in the semester. The point I'm making is that a lot of our history and a lot of our thinking come from a very small subset of possible viewpoints on this planet. And we're in the process right now of trying to be more equitable in our thinking and to include more perspectives in our theories. And you would think, wow, no, science is objective, it doesn't matter who's doing it, but that turns out to be false. And over the course of the semester, we will explore by looking at some videos and papers and essays written by people with different perspectives. And you may also notice that the papers we read on sort of a weekly basis in the various symposia that we're going to do and the discussions you'll be participating in, many of the researchers are from different perspectives, and that is intentional. What you will see is as you begin to include these different perspectives, the whole fundamental theory and ideas about how the world works begin to change. And it's a very exciting time to be in science when we're in the process of making this. And you, depending upon your creative and different perspective, will hopefully contribute something completely different to the theories we have. Anyways, so there you are. That's your place in the tree, and on we go from here.